Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the IC911 Podcast. I'm Ted Walter, Executive Director of the International Center for 9/11 Justice, and I'm joined by my good friends and colleagues, Richard Gage, Madhava Setty, and Piers Robinson. Now, many of you will be familiar with these three gentlemen, but let me just very briefly introduce them. Richard is the third-year architect, roughly, founder and now current CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Madhava is an anesthesiologist. He's a former editor at the Guardian, the Children's Health Defense publication, and he's also now the science advisor of the International Center for 9/11 Justice. And Piers Robinson is an academic, a political scientist, and the research director of the International Center for 9/11 Justice. So thank you all for being here. How are you all doing today?
Good for me.
Good.
I'm good.
I think we've come together to have this conversation because we thought it would be a good idea to touch base after the 24th anniversary. We actually meant to do it like a month ago, but it's just taken us a little bit of time for our schedules to all align. So I think we're actually fortunate that we've ended up doing it now because of this change for Richard, and also we had Dick Cheney die this week. There's been a lot of developments in the last couple of months. I would love to maybe go back to, let's say, talking about the Turning the Tide conference and maybe even what's happened this whole past year. Madhava, I realize I got the name of your publication wrong, which I'm very embarrassed about. The Defender, not the Guardian, I think I said. But anyway, Children's Health Defense. Madhava, you kicked off the Turning the Tide conference with a beautiful speech, which unfortunately the first several minutes of it wasn't recorded because we were still working out our live stream. But how did you feel? What is your takeaway from the conference, and from the role you played in it, and just from everything you saw?
Yeah, I think that would be a good place to start. First of all, it was unfortunate that the first part of my speech was not recorded or transmitted by redacted. My contribution to that tremendous 3-day seminar was to contextualize what we were doing. And I decided, without seeking approval from anyone else, that I would make a appeal to all of the physicians and medical scientists that have been speaking out about COVID for the last 4 years to pay attention to what we were doing there, because we need them. We need objective individuals who understand science and who have, over the course of the last few years, understood how they've been muzzled. And in that sense, we should come together. And it was potentially a taboo perspective to take. And I don't know how it's going to resonate, but I would like to first say that it was quite interesting to take up that stage at that moment, because we had just heard that Charlie Kirk had been shot. And it was only a few minutes after I started speaking that it was announced that he was dead. And what's really interesting to me is, we brought up JFK just now, the JFK assassination. And just to be historically correct, when Jack Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, just under half of the American public realized that there was another story that was out there. That's what the polling showed. And it stayed relatively at 50%. 50% bought the Warren Commission's absurd explanation. And it stayed at 50% until 1976, which is when the public had access to the Zapruder film, which I would consider possibly the most important piece of independent film that's ever been shot. And when that was released, suddenly there was a massive change in public opinion about the Warren Commission, because the polling at that point showed somewhere around 83% now doubted the Warren Commission's explanation of the JFK assassination, because they could see with their eyes what happened, right? I mean, what kind of person grabs an exit wound? Clearly the man was shot from in front. There's no way it was shot from over here, 6 floors up. So my point here is that as we were introducing this Turning the Tide conference, we had a JFK-like assassination that was in progress. And as opposed to where we were in 1963, we had ample footage from all kinds of perspectives that clearly demonstrated that this person was offed in ways that our FBI refused to acknowledge. And I would suggest that for me, my initial feeling was like, oh no, why does this have to happen now? We're trying to talk about 9/11 and national attention is now moved to Charlie Kirk. But I would suggest that this was actually a synergistic event as the weeks, subsequent weeks unfolded in terms of the kind of criticism the FBI was facing with their absurd story. So I don't know. I think that might be a good hook to begin with in terms of putting things together. Like we're seeing it happening in real time. So I don't know. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely just sitting back and strategically assessing what was happening in that moment and what has happened since. There is this unavoidable feeling that the impact of the 24th anniversary was blunted because of the Charlie Kirk assassination. Tucker Carlson would have, I think, premiered his series. He was going to do it on the 11th, and probably would have got a lot more attention than it did. It's gotten a good amount of attention for sure, but it probably would have gotten far more. It would have, and he was going to speak, briefly via live stream at our conference, and it would have just been. I think things were just bubbling over in such a way that it would have been a real kind of explosion of 9/11 skepticism around the anniversary. And in a way, because the Charlie Kirk thing happened, it was almost like our conference. I know, of course, there's other people out there doing 9/11 stuff. There's other events and so on, but it was like our conference. It was almost like the only thing, in the 9/11 space, which was fine, And then Tucker's thing came out a week and a half later, but perhaps big picture. As you said, I mean, this is a horrible, disgusting, and tragic thing that happened to Charlie Kirk. So, but from a perspective of, I'm just going to say the powers that be, kind of again exposing themselves, and the the doubt that has just exponentially grown in the past month and a half or whatever, 2 months, I guess, right now. Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, I think. You wrote a really good piece about it, Madhava, about how, I think investigating Charlie Kirk really, this whole thing really could lead the way or pave the way or lead to something much bigger with 9/11. We saw Candace Owens, she tweeted it one day. We have questions about 9/10. We have questions about 9/11. So these things are going to be linked, and whatever happens with the Charlie Kirk situation, which could be the biggest debacle as this thing goes forward, for the deep state, it really could translate to even, opening the door massively for 9/11 truth. Yeah. Anybody else want to say anything on that topic?
Sorry, Richard, do you want to?
That was funny. I just want to reiterate Madhava's essay on what I reposted as the parallels between 9/11 and Charlie Kirk. 9/11 and 9/10, I might have called it. It was brilliant. I had more feedback on that post, which was Madhava's article, than any I've had before, I believe. It just tied it together. So yes, we can seize the moment of exposure for both of these, and I've been diving deep into Charlie Kirk, and people who aren't diving deep and just assuming for whatever reason that the official story is it must be right, because I don't have time to look at the facts. Yeah. And I've been watching Candace Owens very carefully, and she's providing some speculation, an lot of facts, and she's got an audience that's like 6 million people. It's almost as big as Tucker, and it's revealing for us. So yes, I'm wanting to expose the parallels between these two, because there was a deep state organized crime mafia hit clearly. For those of you who haven't gone into it, as was 9/11, as was COVID, as was Gaza, and we've done, and thanks to Kevin Ryan, who's exposed the parallels that I just picked up and ran with Gaza and COVID. We owe him a deep debt of gratitude, and now with Ron Johnson weighing in already on COVID with a set of hearings that we anticipate will be reproduced next year, on 9/11, as he has as much promised. We are very excited about being put in the opportunity now to the 9/11 Truth Movement to condense our work and publish it and present it to him. We'll be talking more about that, but that was my initial reaction.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly on the Candace thing. We were saying before we started recording, I said, I've been watching her series pretty closely at this point as well. And I feel like, obviously, she just officially became like the #1 podcast internationally this past week.
And the number one enemy of the deep state.
And the number one enemy of the deep state. And I think, I was very young in the 80s. Obviously, I was born in the early 80s, but I have the sense that how many people are watching Candace right now because of just how real it is, how live it is, how real time it is, that like everybody's gathered around the TV kind of like as if watching like, ABC News in the 70s or the 60s or whatever. Like it's this coming together in a way that maybe coming together, like obviously there's so much media, there's so much content out there now, but there's like this just, I think there's something to be gained from people all kind of being on the same just wavelength. I don't know how to explain it because you don't want everybody just sort of like having watching one show and that's where we get all our information from. But there's something about this moment where like Candace is leading the way in making the space for this Charlie Kirk assassination to be investigated and talked about. And it's amazing. And the last point I want to make it on is I think we know that she knows the deal on 9/11. And I think it's only a matter of time before she starts to go there. And, like it's not, it's not as like she's going to do Charlie Kirk and that's going to be over and whatever. Like, I think she's going to make the connection between Charlie Kirk and 9/11. I think she's going to go there. I think Tucker's going to continue to do his thing. So I don't think he's stopping with his series. So Piers?
Tying the Charlie Kirk assassination in with the structural deep events and these JFK through 9/11 through COVID to Kirk. I mean, and picking up on the Candace point, this does highlight how radically different the information environment is today compared to the JFK assassination. As you said, there's a Zapruder film that could be held under wraps effectively for 10 years. It's Time magazine, I think, had ownership of it, and they didn't release it for 10 years. We're in a radically different information environment now, whereby, the deep state's ability to carry out these kind of events or create these events is in a way compromised. And I think Candace Owens is showing that quite clearly. I think trust levels, as a point I repeatedly make, I mean, if you go back to the 70s and you look at the Pew studies on trust in the media, it has dropped from a high of 70% maybe in the 60s, and it's flatlining now. So you have a real sort of encroachment essentially on that kind of mechanism of propaganda that the deep state has always relied upon, the mainstream media. And we have the Candace Owens, we have the independent and the alternative media, which means that, it's a battle, I think, for the deep state when it does carry out these kind of crimes against people and against the population, that they can't contain it in the way they could contain it before. And that we're going to see how this plays out, right? Because Candace, as you said, she's just hit #1 podcast. Tucker Carlson he hasn't quite picked up on the Kirk issue yet, but he's close to Candace Owens, and you can see where that's all going to go in the coming weeks, or at least potentially. So, I think, this could be almost, we'll have to see how it plays out. But this could be a turning point in terms of this awareness of the kind of levels of corruption we're dealing with, and then with this information environment, which allows this radical questioning to be going on. And, in a sense, with these kind of leadership figures of Candace Owens, she's clearly speaking to, the younger generation, and that, she's a powerful force in that sense. The only kind of note of caution I had in there is that, they're working very hard to maintain control, and perhaps we'll get on to this later when we talk about the kind of bigger sort of political context. But they're working extremely hard to try and maintain control of narratives. They're employing new technologies, AI. You still have this kind of concentration of ownership across the media, and they still have a big audience. So it's absolutely the case that trust levels has gone down in the mainstream media, but they're still a force to be reckoned with. So, I've kind of been saying it for a number of years now. We're still in the middle of this rather epic struggle between, populations finding out the truth about these events, and then authorities, the deep state, trying to maintain control. I guess what I worry about a little bit is the kind of what tricks do they have up their sleeves. I mean, we're seeing how the AI technology is playing out now across the internet and social media, and whether that will allow them to regain a degree of control. That's certainly what they will be aiming for. But at the moment, I agree absolutely, and I think Candace is doing a great job. I've been following her reporting on Kirk. And I've also been observing as a European outside the US context, the absurdity. I mean, I don't want to get into personalities on the Kirk assassination, but, there is a lack of reality or plausibility about so many aspects of what the American public is being shown. And I think for people outside the US, people have made these comments. It's theater and so on. American politics is theater, and it seems to have become even more intensified with what we've seen since the Kirk assassination. So,
yeah,
that's an excellent point. Look, the waking up to the bigger picture, the catalyst is going to be different for different people. For engineers and architects, people who understand physical science, the 9/11 official story is so absurdly wrong. But most people can't apprehend that the way we do. And so for them, what will it take? I would say, watching this man in the prime of his life being gunned down raises questions for some people. And for others, it's going to be the fact that they endured a very, very devastating vaccine injury, or someone who got 3 boosters and got COVID 4 times. So it's different for everybody. And, what interests me the most is, where is the collective in terms of their understanding and flexibility in changing their opinion. And the other event that I think is quite interesting to consider in this context is the new mayor of New York City. Independent of what you feel about him or his position or how he declares himself as a democratic socialist, or whether or not he's a true Muslim, or is he a Hindu because his parents, one is Muslim, one is Hindu, it doesn't matter. I mean, I think we should be able to at least acknowledge the fact that this city, which was the prime target of a terrorist attack on 9/11, purportedly from Al-Qaeda, the idea that body politic would elect a person like Mamdani with, a Muslim background would have been incomprehensible 24 years ago. And the fact that it happened just 2 days ago means that there is a shift. It's not necessarily we know that the official story is wrong, but first of all, you've been able to drop your hatred of a group that you think was responsible. That's the first step in opening your eyes, is to get the hate out of the way so that you can look at it more closely. So all of these, in my opinion, are immense signs of change coming. And, those of us who are part of this 9/11 truth movement, we've been pushing for a reinvestigation, right? But what is the actual significance of a reinvestigation if the public is not ready to accept its findings? And what we're seeing right now, I believe, is a place where the public is now willing to accept what a reinvestigation might show. And in order to even have one, we have to elect people who are willing to push for a reinvestigation. And we have not been able to do that because the public hasn't been ready. But now we have someone, and potentially we're going to have more people. And, you know, for the audience out there, behind the scenes, Ted and I met Thomas Massie on September 11th before the events. And he is another outspoken critic of not any particular person, but against the refusal to be transparent. Let's put it that way. And we had a very, I think, I wouldn't say poignant, but a direct conversation. And, you know, Thomas Massie is an MIT engineer as well. And he was willing to hear us out. And he told Ted and I that after we said, you know, Tom, or Representative or Congressman Massie, you really ought to look at 9/11 and maybe you should show up at our event this evening. He told Ted and I, look, I'm in over my head with this Epstein file stuff, you know, another big thing that's going on right now. And, you know, when I said to him, look, Congressman, these things are related if you look deep enough. And he gave me a look, which was, I think, acknowledging the fact that he saw the truth in this. And so, you know, the collapse of the official story is inevitable. And, you know, I would say, I want to add one more thing here, which is, you know, the general public. Again, I'm talking about how does the mentality of the public change? As you said, Richard, you know, most people are unwilling to go deep and look at what is the evidence. And so how do people make up their mind? They generally make up their mind by, well, what do most people think about these things? That's how I'm going to vote. And that is shifting, as we're seeing. People are questioning. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you are of the public that doesn't know what to believe, you should really take a close look at what is the dynamics of the situation. The people who are changing their mind, which way are they going? Are people like, you know, 9/11 truthers that suddenly, you know, put aside all of the evidence and say, no, I'm going to go with the official story? No, it's always the other direction. It's always the other direction. So that is something to really take into consideration as you're trying to decide who is more credible and who deserves my attention. Look at where people are moving to and then decide who you're going to listen to.
Absolutely.
The traffic is one way.
The traffic is one way. So there's no way they're going to win. I mean, you know, yes, you're right. We should be aware of what their next step is, what the deep state's next step to try to contain this movement to truth is going to be. But they're fighting a losing battle. There's no way that they're going to be able to contain this for very long. You know, so again, I always stress, let's be positive. Let's be optimistic. There's no way we're going to fail.
Yeah. And your comment at the conference motto was that it's a rising tide, and they're trying to suppress a rising tide, and you can't stop a rising tide.
Yeah.
And in terms of people only going in one direction, one of those people recently is Senator Ron Johnson. As you spoke to, the reason why this man's mind is opened to the truth is because he figured out the truth about COVID, and he was, I guess, courageous and compassionate enough to take a stand on it. And along the way, he tells this story. He met RFK Jr., who gave him Eric Douglas's book, JFK and the Unspeakable. And so he started learning about that assassination and the other assassinations. And I think that opened his mind ultimately to 9/11. And of course, he has a neighbor who, his contractor or whatever, who built half of his house, who's aware of 9/11. You know, I'm sure that helped as well. And I mean, this is how, again, as you said, your mind changes, your mind opens based on what other people around you are saying. And so, yeah, we have Senator Ron Johnson now, who's come out in the past year, the past 6 months, and who we were fortunate enough agreed to speak at our conference. Richard has had a few Zoom calls with him to, you know, give him the full rundown on the evidence of the demolition of the towers in Building 7. And we had that meeting with him on September 10th, a few hours before the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I think 8 or 9 of us went to his office. We did all this planning about how to manage that meeting, and thinking that we were going to do all the talking and that we had to tell our story to Ron Johnson. And we were in for a surprise, because I think he knew what he wanted out of that meeting, which was to basically propose his idea that he would have, rather than giving his small staff the task of creating some kind of report and doing an investigation and then presenting it in hearings, that he would give the 9/11 Truth Movement that task, that would be able to do a much better job, that actually have more kind of combined resources and certainly all of the expertise and time, and to produce that report for him. And so we, in the first moment that he said it, it kind of felt like he was pushing it on us, or pushing away the responsibility, but actually just with a little time to process it and make sense of what he was saying, this to me was the best possible situation that we could ask for, as far as working with a senator who's the chair of a committee, which is, he is giving us the opportunity to put together a report that will be presented in his committee. And so we have since, and then he spoke about that in the conference that evening. I think that was a huge moment. Again, he had this feeling that would be like an underwhelming message to the 9/11 Truth Movement. Like he does, but he says he's not the expert. We are the experts, and the best that he can do to do his part, which seems to me like that's what he tries to do. That's his approach to these issues, is just very logical, practical. This is what I can do. This is what I can offer. I have a committee. I have a responsibility to
Wait, this is not just any committee, Ted. This is the permanent subcommittee on investigations for the whole Senate.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, it's an important committee. It has subpoena power. It has broad scope, can investigate pretty much whatever it wants. And give the 9/11 Truth Movement essentially a platform to make its case, for it, that the official story of 9/11 is false, and that there needs to be a new investigation. And so again, his speech was momentous, and people, there were standing ovations, and people had questions, and it was a powerful moment. And as since then, I think we can talk about this. We have, for the past couple months now, been sort of getting organized and figuring out what this will look like, and getting a team together and a plan together to produce a report that will eventually be presented next year. Hopefully not just at one hearing, but at a number of hearings. We'll see where we get to by then. But I think that there'll be a lot of material to present, and I've seen how these hearings go, and I don't think one hearing will be enough to present what needs to be presented to the American people. Richard, you are working on that report along with Piers, me, Raul Angulo, on behalf of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, Mick Harrison, the former litigation director for the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. I think we are going to be, we have to figure out what the process is going to look like in terms of getting public input or getting public feedback on this report. But, one thing I think we can say now is this report, it's going to have a broad scope. It's not just going to be the controlled demolition of the towers and Building 7. And it's going to, but the standard that we have to hold ourselves to is irrefutability. That, the senator and his staff emphasized that the evidence that we assemble has to be irrefutable, which gives the 9/11 Truth Movement and us working on this the opportunity to go through everything that the 9/11 Truth Movement has produced over the past 24 years and vet what sort of, in our view, reaches that standard of irrefutability. I think we should talk about Tucker Carlson's series, but I just want to say that, if nothing else, I think it goes without saying that this is an amazing opportunity that maybe we couldn't have imagined even just a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And that this could be these hearings and this report on the 25th, around the 25th anniversary of 9/11, could be, a massive vehicle that will allow people like, Tucker Carlson or the public in general, but there will need to be another vehicle, that another big push to keep pushing the boulder up the hill And so this report and these hearings might be that, and it might provide the opportunity for many people that have held back and not wanted to touch it, finally the opportunity to say, it's time to look at this. We've got a senator who's holding hearings. And so, Madhava?
Yes. I agree. We should talk about Tucker before we close out. But I want to say one thing. On September 10th, that morning and afternoon before we started, Ron Johnson had a subcommittee hearing about COVID. And what was interesting about that was that the establishment experts were completely demolished by testimony from a couple of people, including Aaron Siri and Toby
Rogers. I actually went to grad school with Toby at Berkeley.
Did you really?
Yeah. So it's funny that we're both doing work with Ron Johnson and his.
Yeah. Well, my point here is, let's look ahead to this subcommittee on 9/11 that Ron Johnson will have, and you folks will be presenting this argument. Who is going to speak out against it? Like with COVID, there's all of these doctors and scientists and infectious disease specialists that say no, Bobby Kennedy is wrong and the vaccines are safe or whatever. Who is going to support the official narrative? I mean, what qualified voice is going to speak out and say that no, the science shows that these buildings came down from gravitational collapses? There's not going to be anyone that's going to be able to that's worth their weight that would be able to support the official story. It's going to be a one-sided show for sure. I mean, if COVID was a one-sided show in that hearing, imagine who are they going to get? Sham Sundar. I don't think that guy's going to show his face ever again.
Well, I mean, sorry, I don't know if you're hearing my cat here, but Sham Sundar may be invited by Ron Johnson, to answer questions. He may or may not come. I don't know. Richard Blumenthal, the ranking member, the Democrat in the committee, may want to invite Sham Sundar, but I don't think he's going to want. Yeah, he may not want to show up. I don't know what his obligation to is, but yeah.
I mean, look, we know that man has, some impeccable training from all over the world. He can't, obviously he's not going to be able to defend his position. I mean, it's so absurdly wrong. Yeah. So I'm just saying that the chances for success are extremely high. And I would be very curious to see who they're going to be able to bring on to oppose the truth, let's say.
Yeah. One other thought, because I put a lot of thought into that, Madhava, and one other area is the possibility of them bringing a 9/11 victim family member who, really opposes what we're trying to do, reinvestigating it with a different theory in mind of what happened. I want to let people know that we're not just thinking we're going to put together a report with all the best science and all the best facts and all the best evidence, and that's going to carry the day. We are putting a lot of thought into the politics of this situation, and we have reached out to one of the Jersey girls who is interested in participating, helping out with the report, and also probably testifying at the hearings. And the firefighters will be another major component of this, and that's why Firefighters for 9/11 Truth is a part of this project. Ron Johnson said something, if it wasn't for the victim family members and the firefighters, we wouldn't be here, or you wouldn't be here in my office. And we have a lot of, I'll just say, Raul Angulo, who many of you listening will be familiar with, relatively new on the scene of 9/11 Truth, but he is now kind of leading the way at Firefighters for 9/11 Truth. He's very, very well established in the fire service community as an author for magazines like Fire Engineering and so on. And he knows all the leadership of these publications and of the major organizations in the national fire service community. And I think, and he spoke with an editor of one of these magazines earlier this week. And he said, hey, once you get a little bit more exposure, a little more traction, we'll start talking about this. We are ready. So the leaders of the national fire service community are ready to start talking about this once it gains momentum. And I think our focus is on getting to a point by next summer where the fire service, the national fire service, is ready to jump on board, is ready to go to these hearings and support us. And again, I think we're stacking the deck so that the ranking Richard Blumenthal and Democrats, whoever, they just won't have any way to, to oppose us in this hearing. It's going to be tremendous success.
So
Right.
Before we go on to Tucker, I just wanted to make the point. There's a lot of cynics out there who say, okay, Johnson has said this and that, and you can't rely upon people in the political establishment to go anywhere with this issue. But the history of social movements and successful social movements, you always have this combining of sort of grassroots activism, and then you need to sort of break into those sort of breaks in the political opportunity structure, and you need to make those links with people who are in those positions. And there's always this big debate. There's always a big debate about the Vietnam War. Was this popular grassroots resistance to or opposition to that war which brought it to an end, or was it elite driven and so on? But when you really look into the details of these cases, it's always a synergy between the two. And so so what we're seeing with the 9/11 truth movement and what we're seeing with this initial sort of linking in with elite political actors such as Johnson is a critical moment in the history of social movements which become successful and create change. You always see that pattern. So this is a big opportunity, and it's important for the wider audience out there and those people who are cynical and say this can only ever be the grassroots who drive this. No, we need to make these linkages. We need to get a connection with people at the top of the power structure in order to get this change and to get the awareness through. So it's very positive, and we should, however guarded, I think Johnson was very guarded, right, in how he addressed the Turning the Tide conference. Sort of politicians have to do, and they have to maneuver, and they have to play a particular game and so on. And, we need to work with that. But it is important, and it is the way we ultimately will get to where we want to get to with this issue, which is full inquiry and then a proper reckoning and justice for the crime which occurred.
Yeah, we've never had a sitting senator pay any attention to us, and only one or two congressmen in the last 24 years. So this is historic. Just the fact that he's paying attention, that he sat with me for 90 minutes, watching every component of the explosive demolition evidence for the 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers. And I can tell you, he was listening intently and blown away. So how did we get 90 minutes? And then he continues to reference our work with every interview that he does. No matter where it is, when the subject of 9/11 comes up, and he often brings it up. So he's committed to the issue, and we're going to see that he's follows through with what we took as a promise to have these hearings. And he knows exactly what we're going to be presenting in those hearings. He knows exactly that we're going to be talking about the free fall of Building 7 after witnesses hear explosions straight down suddenly into its own footprint in under 7 seconds. He knows that the Twin Towers, after we proved Building 7 was a controlled demolition, and there's, again, no evidence whatsoever that a steel frame high-rise has ever collapsed due to fire. This is the first instance. It's completely unprecedented. So if that's the case, and we prove that it is in many, many ways, certainly to his satisfaction, then we have to say, are the Twin Towers explosively demolished? Well, in 60 seconds, we can see together at the same time the simultaneous destruction of these towers side by side in our presentation. Upward, outward, arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying structural steel sections ejected laterally out of the towers, clocked by physicists at 80 miles an hour, landing up to 600 feet in every direction, trailed by thick white smoke clouds. Steel is not flammable in office fire conditions. What are these thick white smoke clouds? This, of course, is aluminum oxide ash, the other byproduct, in addition to molten iron, which is all over the place in the World Trade Center. So he saw all of this and he's creating a platform. And all we have to do is assemble it in one cohesive whole, which is a hell of a lot of work for us. We haven't done this. We haven't come together before in the 9/11 Truth Movement and created this body, this compilation of work, which is integrally tied and graphically presented in a very, very professional way. So
I would say, the funny thing is, Richard, when we've talked about this in our meetings, to some extent, we have done this over and over again. There's been all these different situations where we've had to repackage the evidence for a specific need or a specific context, whether it was beyond misinformation or the lawyers committee petition or the request for correction, or your white paper or for the presidential commission document. So it's been done, and here's yet another situation where we have to do it. But I think this one is going to be, the pinnacle. And it's also going to be broader than just the demolition. And I think it's been a long time since, people, there was the Toronto report, which is still like maybe 2/3 focused on controlled demolition. So we've got the controlled demolition evidence we will be adding, there is some new evidence to be added, I think, over the next 6 months, some to be developed, but putting things together in an irrefutable way and the other aspects of 9/11 for the 25th anniversary, that's going to be a major undertaking. And we will be working with, many researchers throughout the movement. Many people will be contributing to this so that we make the best case possible. It's going to be a huge task, but it's, we're going to get there. And I'm very, very optimistic about the power that this document will carry when we are finished. And coming out of the 25th anniversary, I mean, it's just a number, but people care about numbers like this. And a quarter of a century. Yeah. Piers?
Sure. No, it matters for sure. It's the 25th anniversary. It will increase the impact. So this is a critical moment, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys who, Madhava and Piers, especially with your work on the COVID issue, just Johnson's interview with Brett Weinstein and what you make of that and the significance of that interview. And maybe just for the audience who may not know who Brett Weinstein is as well, maybe say a little bit about him.
Well, Brett Weinstein is an evolutionary biologist or a biologist, and he has a very popular podcast, Dark Horse, I think.
Dark Horse, yeah.
And he was instrumental in breaking out some very, very key information in the spring of 2021, where he hosted Dr. Robert Malone, who's now on the ACIP committee for the CDC, appointed by Bobby Kennedy, and Steve Kirsch, who is another MIT engineer, by the way. And they were talking about really what was the biodistribution study. But my point here is that he's been instrumental in moving the conversation towards a legitimate repudiation of the COVID-19 response. And as you said, Ted, he had Ron Johnson on. And, this is something that I've been praying for. I've been praying for the COVID-19 pandemic or pandemic skeptics to take on the 9/11 issue because they're more than well equipped. It's not a matter of, you don't have to be a structural engineer to see what the distortion of science looks like. So that was extremely encouraging to me that he spoke out in support of a reinvestigation. What did you think, Piers?
No, I think it's really important. It's indicative of the normalization of talking about 9/11, that you now have someone like Brett Weinstein who is openly discussing it. And, and as Madhava knows, with the COVID resistance movement, which I've been involved with, worked for Pandata for a while, or Panda and Nick Hudson, he's a significant figure. And, he commands a considerable amount of respect amongst a large community of people who woke up during COVID. So the fact that he's openly talking about it is extremely important. The other thing was I was just struck that this was it an hour and a half, and the whole thing was running on 9/11 for an hour and a half. And so, this goes back to a point about what Ron Johnson, and I guess this is forward to when we'll talk about Tucker in a second, it's the fact this is this basic legitimation that these things are okay to talk about now. And I think in a way, both Johnson appearing at Turning the Tide and the other Kurt Weld and other political figures who are there, it feels that we can talk about this in a way that, and the little story I always tell is that when I mentioned, I think it might have been Richard Gage or Halsey's study, I mentioned it in a tweet in 2016-17, and I immediately had Oliver Cam from the Times of London all over my Twitter feed asking for my reading lists, saying, "Oh, what are you pushing this stuff on your students," and so on. And it was, you cannot speak about this, absolutely forbidden, and so on. And we're in a different phase. And I think what we saw with Brett Weinstein talking to Johnson, it feels we can talk about this, and this is an opening, a breath of fresh air in a way. So I think it's extremely important. I think that, along with the Tucker Carlson series, what we saw at Turning the Tide, these are all very positive signs that this is now opening up. And hopefully we'll make further inroads into the COVID resistance. Certainly a lot of people who I've worked with, Nick Hudson, for example, are pretty much on board with 9/11 now, having initially been very skeptical of the claims we were making. So,
yeah, there's almost a double-edged sword. It being so normalized because, Tucker Carlson puts out this documentary where in episode 4, he spends half the episode talking about Building 7 and didn't create any sort of controversy at all, really. All the controversy about Tucker in the past week is him interviewing Nick Fuentes.
I know.
So that's interviewing Nick Fuentes is way worse than talking about Building 7, apparently.
Well, that being said, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, of course, it's not just about Nick Fuentes. Like the Daily Wire interviewed Nick Fuentes, and nobody cared. So it's obviously about Tucker and what he's doing overall. That the Zionist establishment
this is Zionist is ready. Yeah.
But Madhava, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to commend you, Ted, and you, Piers, for this article that you wrote about the 5-part series that Tucker put out. It was a very, very, I would say, difficult article to write, to strike the right balance between a legitimate critique of where he potentially missed the boat while still offering him kudos for what he's done. And I think, in the 9/11 truth movement, there's going to be a lot of people who watch the series and said, "Oh, it's a limited hangout, and this, what does it really do?" And his dad was CIA, so we can't trust him. It's like, look, honestly, cynicism, that's never changed anything. You don't get anywhere with cynicism. It's always hope that moves things forward. And, I would suggest that cynicism is born of fear. It's a fear of being naive. Who cares? I mean, does it matter? Okay, so we were wrong. Maybe Tucker is a limited hangout. Maybe he's not going to go all the way. Why would you sort of stick to that? It's like, oh, I don't want to be wrong about what I said about Tucker. This man is moving the needle towards a point of clarity. And it's going to happen in stages. No one is going to go jump from. I remember how hard it was for me to actually, after I came to my own conclusions, to actually say it to somebody else. Like, this is actually what I think happened on 9/11. Mm-hmm. That's a huge step. It's one thing to sit there and talk about it with your spouse. It's another thing to go out publicly and say what you think happened. And this is a man that has millions of people following him. And in a matter of, from his interview with Kurt Weldon back in the spring to September, he's put together a 5-part series, and he's out there saying, this is something we need to look at. This is an enormous step for a man. And so, I would like, first of all, again, to commend you for, writing an article that really encapsulated what this is all about. And also, I hope our community will, give this guy some room to find his way before slamming him for not going all the way.
Yeah, and he didn't go all the
Absolutely.
way.
We need to learn to have some empathy, I think. I think this is a point you made, Madhava, that people are, remember when we woke up about this and how we felt, we need to have empathy for people and that they're on a journey and not to, as you say, just to attack. That's a sort of instinctive response a lot of people have.
Yeah.
Well, the public would not have been able to go with him all the way. I mean, the right, which he kind of represents, at least a huge fraction of it, and it is fractured.
Yeah.
But now especially, but he couldn't. He felt, I'm speculating, that he felt that he could not tell people that this was an inside job, that he had to give some weight to the Osama bin Laden narrative.
Mhm.
I'm not going to excuse him for that. And you guys didn't really either, but you tried to understand that you can only push the Overton window so far at a time without losing credibility. And our hope, I think all of us, is that he will continue pushing that and certainly interview us on the explosive demolition that we've been clearly elucidating for 20 years now at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He needs to back himself up with more than just the Halsey report from the University of Alaska, which proved that the building could not have come down by fire. And but that was a huge step for him. That's technical, irrefutable stuff. Good job, Tucker. You put it in there.
Right.
And same for the active thermitic materials discovered in the World Trade Center dust paper by Niels Harrit and Stephen Jones and others. That he put out as if, look at this, guys. He proved that it was an inside job because those things don't happen because of airplanes and Arab terrorists. Those things happen only because it was an inside job. So he did stick his foot firmly on that stone.
I agree with you, Richard. That was quite a statement to make, and especially to go to that part of the evidence, which is, very important. But, to anyone who might be listening to this, who is like looking at this for the first time, I would always suggest that when someone says that they've changed their mind about something they were certain of, that's when you need to listen in. Okay, because this person, and I'm speaking of Tucker, who interestingly, not only admitted that he was wrong in the past, as we all know, his attack on David Ray Griffin back in 2006, but he's ashamed of it. He's ashamed of what he did. This is an enormous position to take. And I would suggest it doesn't matter if you agree with him, or it doesn't matter if it's about 9/11, but if you have someone that said, I believed this forever, and then I saw something that made me change my mind, you really should listen to what he's saying. Like, why did he change his mind? And so that is something to take into consideration as you examine what this person is saying. And also, Tucker has been doing this for a very long time. His job is to shift public opinion. And I would say he's smart enough to realize that once you open the door to it was a MIHOP, make it happen on purpose, the obvious next question is who did it? And I think he's smart enough to understand that maybe that is a little bit too far to go to at this point, because it's clear where the greatest suspicion should be placed. And in my opinion, there is enough suspicion around who had the most to gain and who were the big players and who might be implicated already. So it's like a gravitational force that's pulling public opinion towards the obvious conclusion. And it's moving fast. And as we get closer and closer to the center of mass, you're going to get sucked in faster and faster. So this is an inexorable force towards what is the most likely explanation. And So let's cross our fingers. Let's count on the the theory of gravitational attraction to bring us to the truth here.
Well, I think we just have to push harder. We have an opportunity here, and we keep pushing and push harder. And
yeah, I mean, but Tucker really can't push his audience that far, right? I mean, that was my point.
For sure. Yeah, it's up for us to take advantage, I think, absolutely, of what Tucker's done with this series and to take people to the next stage. I mean, I said, slightly sort of about the impact of it and so on, and sort of is this yesterday's news with a lot of people. But if you look at the viewing figures on YouTube, the first episode is right there in his top 3 YouTube videos from last few years. So this will, I think, will stand the test of time, and it will become a resource that people will go back to. But it's then up to people such as us to go the rest of the way. And I'm sure he will. He's going to come back to this issue. He wouldn't have made that input into the creation of that series just to leave it behind. He'll come back to it, I'm sure.
Without a doubt.
And we're not on the right here. We're just happening to be focusing on Tucker and Candace and those who are opening their minds to our issue for the last 24 years. If Bernie Sanders or even Adam Schiff were to start talking about 9/11, we'd be supporting them on that issue. So this is not a left-right partisan issue.
No, and I think I think we see from the election of Zoran Mondani that the left is Israel is has become obviously a major issue over the last few years, and both on the right and the left. The resistance to Israel is just grown and perhaps growing exponentially. And I think the left will, obviously the right, it goes without saying that, say, over the past 5 to 10 years, the right has taken far more interest in 9/11 truth, and Ron Johnson, people like Ron Johnson and Kurt Weldon, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens are leading the way. But these people also are, when it comes to these issues, I credit all of them for not making it a partisan issue. They are when it comes to this topic, at least, and the deep state, the power of the deep state and Zionism and all these things, it's not about left, right. Dennis Kucinich spoke at our conference on the 11th, and that was probably, we'd all agree, maybe the most powerful. I mean, Ron Johnson had some very important message to deliver, but Dennis Kucinich's speech was incredibly powerful. And I think we'll start to see more and more interest on the left in 9/11 coming months, without a doubt.
Their playbook is going to be, once this idea of 9/11 truth gets some traction, the playbook is always to politicize it, to make it some sort of right-wing conspiracy or left-wing, whatever. And I would suggest that when that happens, that's a good sign that we have made some headway. But as we know, once you actually open your eyes to the real story, it's very hard to be political. I mean, you look at both sides as distractions to the truth. So it's pulling us in, people.
Yeah, without a doubt.
We got to tell people where they can find these speeches we're referring to.
So I mean, as of now, you can go to IC911.org and find the live stream videos. And there's an article in our talks and conversations section where you can find links to each separate talk. But if you go to those live stream videos, there's chapters in the videos. We've been a little slow in terms of publishing each individual video as a standalone, each presentation as a standalone video. But just go to the homepage of IC911, perhaps Richard, for you as well. Or that would really be the easiest way to find it. We will be launching a website dedicated to memorializing the Turning the Tide conference that will have all the talks there. And I don't think it's too soon to say that we are planning to have another conference next year, probably under the banner of Turning the Tide on the 25th anniversary, and probably going to be in New York City. So I would say, like, anybody who's interested in being a part of this wave, this rising of the tide, mark your calendars for next anniversary for going to New York City if you want to be a part of it. Richard, do you want to add anything about where to find that or anything else important?
Oh, I thought the website was launched, turningthetide.org. Is it?
It's not quite live yet. Probably a
Okay.
couple more
Don't
weeks.
go there yet, I
We'll go
guess.
there, but yeah. Well, we didn't get to talk about Dick Cheney. Is the passing of Dick Cheney important to us? What do you guys make of that?
Well, again, it's what is the public response to this man's passing? And I would say that very few people are saying good things about this guy, which is good.
Yep.
When you first brought up Dick Cheney at the beginning of this, I caught myself smiling, ear to ear. It's like, wow, what kind of person needs to pass in order to get me to grin like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I would definitely say I felt a pang of disappointment when I learned, that he died. There's this, and not even for the, not getting justice, but this idea of like, does that push our issue further into the history books, with perhaps one of the main perpetrators no longer being with us? But
I don't know. I'd say it's just one less point of resistance to the truth coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps.
And on the other side, does he have a chilling effect on free speech about 9/11, even from the grave? That's something to consider.
How so? Elaborate, Richard.
Elaborate.
Because the spirit behind him was not good, and it lives on.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. I think, first of all, I want to say we kicked off this IC911 podcast kind of last spring. We've done a handful because we've been so busy doing research, putting together this conference. We barely skimmed the surface almost of what was featured at the conference, but and what the research front. But I hope that we do these podcasts more. Whether it's all four of us or whoever. I think this coming year there's going to be a lot of progress made, and I have a feeling we'll have a need to be doing these podcasts more and sharing what's going on. But I've really enjoyed talking to you guys very much. All right, well, thanks, you guys. Let's do it again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.